You're listening to Free-ish in Higher Ed. Welcome back to Free-ish in Higher Ed. I'm your host, Chelsea, and today I'm joined by someone whose work is deeply rooted in the fight for student equity and access. She's the co-founder of the Student Basic Needs Coalition, an organization working to make sure students don't have to choose between their education and their survival. I'm so excited to have her here to talk about the powerful work Student Basic Needs Coalition is doing across the country. Thank you so much for joining me today, Paige. Can you start by introducing yourself and sharing a little about your role with SBNC?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Paige. I'm the co-founder and co-executive director of the Student Basic Needs Coalition. We're a national nonprofit that bridges tech, policy, and student leadership to address all sorts of basic needs issues, but we're especially focused on food, housing, and healthcare at this point in time. We launched in 2020 and we've grown significantly since then. I've been running this organization since we started in 2020. And now 5 years later, we've grown a ton. We have 3 full-time employees, 2 part-time, and around 35 paid student leaders. We've trained over 100 student leaders who've implemented policy initiatives that have impacted over 177,000 students. And we've referred students to over $27 million in SNAP benefits. And our goal over the next couple of years is to continue growing our organization. And we're actually launching a moonshot goal of connecting students to $100 million in benefits this year. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey so far, and I'm excited to get more into it.
Thank you so much, not only for taking time to be here, but also for all of the incredible work that you all are doing. I wanted to ask if you could tell listeners a little bit about how the SBNC got started and how everything kind of came together.
I started college in 2017. I was paying for everything myself, working multiple jobs, around 30 hours a week at Chick-fil-A, at a on-campus tutoring job where I was a writing tutor. And about halfway through my freshman year, I was able to secure a research position. And that happened to be in a lab where we were studying food and housing insecurity on campus. And so as I was conducting interviews for my research with students who had previously indicated they were experiencing some of these barriers, I realized how much I identified with their stories, hearing them talk about skipping meals to make it through the week, sleeping in so that they, didn't have to worry about breakfast. And then some students were even in much more severe situations like sleeping in their cars or, things like that. So I think through that, I realized that some of the issues that I was experiencing were much more systemic. They weren't just things that myself or a couple of other students had experienced, but they were actually really widespread. And with that information, I collaborated with my research team and we started advocating for solutions to some of these issues on our campus. So we built a training curriculum for faculty and staff to learn about recognizing students in crisis, how to connect them to the right support, and how to make sure students weren't falling through the cracks. And as we expanded, we realized that this issue was really widespread across, all over the country. I actually was invited to go to a Swipe Out Hunger conference, and that's kind of where the national organization got its start because I met my co-founder there, Owen, and he went to University of Tennessee, and he was actually an RA there, which is like a resident advisor person in the dorms, keeping an eye on the students. And he actually saw a lot of his residents drop out because they couldn't afford to stay in school. And so that was kind of like the, starting point of their organization. And they both happened to have the same name. We both called our Student Basic Needs Coalition. And then a couple years later, it was summer of 2020, the middle of COVID. And we were all, about to graduate. They were starting grad school. And, we were just thinking, like, how do we make a difference in this time where there's so much need? And that was when we got the idea that we should combine our organizations and create a national movement from that. And so that's really how the organization was born. We started as a volunteer-run group in 2020, and since then we've grown into a national organization working on 500 campuses in all 50 states.
Learning about how it all got started is really inspiring because I, as an advocate, am always looking for how can I do more? And just hearing your story of how things started and now that it is having this huge national impact has just really inspired me. So thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to ask about, so a big part of what SBNC does is helping students access SNAP benefits, especially through the Peer Navigator program. I wanted to see if you could walk us through how that works and the kind of impact it's having on campuses.
Yeah, SNAP is, as a lot of people know, is one of the most effective anti-hunger programs in the country. But unfortunately, 69% of eligible college students are not enrolled in this resource. And that's a really big problem because students are missing out on an average of around, $3,000 to $4,000 a year in benefits that they could be spending on groceries, or that they could be saving, to be able to cover other expenses. And so to address this issue, we thought, who better to solve this than students themselves? Students listen to other students. Students, care about what their peers think and are more likely to listen to a friend's recommendation to do something than maybe, something they see in a campus-wide email or something like that.
Right.
So our Peer Navigator program really brings this together by training students to help their peers understand their eligibility process and walk them through the whole application. So it's peer-to-peer support, but also with a big technology component. Our peer navigators will use voter registration drive techniques, like campus tabling, walking around with like an iPad to get people to complete the screener. And then, once they reach students, they fill out our screener, and then they're directed through a process that can even bring them all the way through to application submission. And in the first year of the program, our students referred their peers to around $1.7 million in benefits.
Wow.
And just this year, so since January, we referred students to over $27 million in SNAP and Medicaid together. And so I think that really shows that when students are getting support from their peers and someone who's been in their shoes, they're, more likely to be willing to try that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that's been a reoccurring theme on some of the previous episodes we've done here is we talk a lot about support and access to resources, but I think challenging when you're not even sure that you qualify and all of those different things that I'm sure you guys experience when you're dealing with students who are eligible and a lot of them just may not know. I wish every school had this because I think every campus could benefit from these programs. So I wanted to see if you could talk about some of the policy work that SBNC is involved in and what kind of changes are you all pushing for when it comes to student basic needs?
Definitely. So I think that one of our biggest priorities has always been making sure that no one can deny the issue of student basic needs insecurity. So our first advocacy initiative that we took on was in Tennessee, and we worked with a group of students there to write legislation that required the Tennessee Higher Education Commission to conduct a report that would identify, the status of food insecurity across campuses and see what campuses were doing to address this issue. After that report was released, so the legislation passed, and the report was released around a year later, 2 years ago. And since then, the legislators in Tennessee have, come up with their own ideas for how to address these issues. So without us even continuing this advocacy work, they've been able to use that research and create policies that are really supportive of students. And, there's a ton of organizations on the ground, of course, that have been supporting this too over the years. But I think that it's pretty clear evidence that when a state has their own research, done by their own people, they're much more likely to understand it, to empathize with it, and to be motivated to create policies based on that. And so that's the basis for a lot of our advocacy work that we've been doing. We recently have started replicating this in South Carolina. We had a group of students at USC there who did a report. They actually did their own study on food insecurity across around 30 schools in the state to figure out, what resources they were providing to students and what they really needed to make their programs more successful. And the students brought this report that they did to the State House to talk to legislators about what their colleges really need, what students really need, and their ideas for getting this done. So we're hoping to replicate this across many states this year.
Can you come to Texas next?
Yes, I think we could definitely come to Texas. We definitely specialize in helping students in more difficult legislative environments, where people have been historically opposed to some of these public support programs. But we really believe that they benefit everyone, and they, lift up whole communities. And so there's, a really strong ROI to supporting college students, in addition to just, we should all care that people get fed. Um,
Yeah, definitely. As a student with the lived experience, it's really nice to see organizations that get it. And I feel like you guys are one of those organizations that not only gets it, but you're also really doing the work to highlight these issues and bring awareness to them and like the solutions. That's the part where you guys are really making great strides. And it makes me feel seen as someone that has the lived experience. So I just really appreciate all the work that y'all are doing.
Yeah, thank you for, telling me that you feel seen by the work that we're doing. I think that really gets to the heart of what we tried to do. This is something that we hear from a lot of people is like, oh, I wish we had this when I was in school. Like I really needed someone to care about me in this way. And I think that it's definitely really motivating and inspiring for our team, is knowing that what we're doing is having a real impact on current students and honestly former students too. So I think that that's always amazing to hear.
Absolutely. And Paige, you're leading in such a powerful and impactful way, but I know leadership like this takes collaboration. So, what does coalition building look like at SBNC?
Right now, we're really focused on these state working groups. So we've been working with similar groups in South Carolina and North Carolina, Tennessee, and a couple of other states. What these usually look like is they're a group of colleges, a group of social service workers, nonprofit leaders, and students who all have some sort of interest in this college basic needs world. And while these exist in some states, there are a lot of states where they don't exist in at all. And so our goal is to help support these networks so that there's all of these ongoing in-state communications. And then we're hoping to be able to work with these states, support them in their advocacy work, support them in connecting students to benefits, and overall help them uplift student voice, in these groups that they're leading. So I think that these groups really help us scale our ideas faster and avoid, people reinventing the wheel and doing the same things over and over instead of collaborating, which is, our main goal here. Not just amplifying student voices, but really redistributing power and building lasting infrastructure so that no student has to choose between their education and whether they'll eat that night.
And I love how you said redistributing power because I feel like a lot of times decisions are made for students that impact students. And I think it's really important to bring the student voices to the front when it comes to solutions and policy making, and even within higher education institutions for faculty to be aware what students actually need as opposed to, making those choices and decisions for them. So I think that's really important. I wanted to actually ask what advice you would give to higher ed leaders or even students who want to better support basic needs on their campuses, but don't know where to start. I know you guys have a lot of resources, but what it kind of would be like the starting point for them to get.
I think the most important thing for higher education leaders is to start by listening to students. They're the experts on their own experiences and they know what needs to be done. And the most effective solutions we've seen didn't necessarily come from these top-down policies. They came from students who are living the barriers every single day. And then as for students, I would say don't wait for the perfect plan or the perfect idea. Just start where you are. Your experience is valid. Your experience is helpful to people in leadership roles. And, your experience is necessary to have an impact. So I think that, students can start with what they know how to do already. It could be asking their fellow students about their experiences. It could be, just talking about these issues a little bit more. and then go from there. So if you're a student, definitely know that you don't have to do it alone. We have a national movement growing right here, and we're happy to support you and any students who want to get involved with this type of work.
Okay, and that brings me to my last question as we wrap up. How can people get connected with SBNC? How does that work? Where can they find you?
Definitely. So our website is pretty easy. It's just studentbasicneeds.com. You can definitely get in touch with us there. We're also on LinkedIn a lot. That's where we post a lot of opportunities for students and for faculty and staff. As for getting involved, we're always looking for students to advocate. We're hopefully going to be bringing on some more regional organizers soon to do this movement building work across the country. And we'll definitely be looking for students to lead some of those movements. As for higher education leaders, we'd love to help schools use our tech tool. So we built an AI tool that allows students to go from eligibility screener to a completed application in a significantly reduced time from, in person and unautomated processes. So we're always happy to connect schools to that resource as well. Yeah, definitely lots of ways to get involved. And we love to hear from anyone who wants to join us in this work.
Yeah, so I will definitely include links to not only your LinkedIn, but also your website. And I highly encourage listeners to go check out all of the wonderful work that they're doing. And students, look for them on LinkedIn because there are lots of opportunities. I just wanted to thank you again so much for your time and for joining and lending your voice to my passion project, Free-ish Higher Ed. And thank you again so much for all of the work that you're doing.
Cool. And thank you so much for having me.
If something in this episode moved you or resonated with you, don't be afraid to use your voice or step into your purpose. And if you want to be part of this conversation or have a story to tell, I want to hear it. You can email me at free.ishpodcast@gmail.com. That's free.ishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also DM me on Instagram at free.ishpodcast. We're free-ish, and we're claiming our space unapologetically.